the bowlers? What's your approach with the bowlers?
Bowlers is difficult. Bowlers is you're dealing. Leg spin is a highly technical craft, and similarly to batsmen, if you've got a young kid who naturally understands leg spin, then you have to do very little technical work. It's a lot of tactical work, and through the tactical work, you'll present problems that require technical answers. Whereas people who are just picking up the ball for the first time, a young 10-year-old who's I want to bowl leg spin. So they'll come to cutting edge where I work, and you'll have to build a technique around them. But it's so personal as well. Attitude, if they're a naturally aggressive person, then they'll want to run in and give the ball a rip. Whereas the introverted type of cricketers tend to want to be more conservative. They want to land the ball and they're not really fussed about turning it. So bowling, in terms of spin bowling coaching, is incredibly difficult to do because you've really got to get to know the player. Fast bowling is a whole different kettle of fish. The older I get, the more I'm moving away from even touching fast bowling techniques, because your risk of injury is far too great if you give the wrong instruction to the wrong body type. And the wrong action. It's very dangerous to do. I like to think that I have an understanding of fast bowling coaching, but in terms of coaching now, I refer to Solomon, who I work with. He understands it. I just go, you know what, mate, I get what you're doing, but I have no confidence to be able to give full advice on it.
Mm. And your approach to fielding, do you spend much time on that? Because it's so important with fielding to put pressure in a match.
Sadly, my fielding coaching when I was head coach lacked. And I'm happy to say that, during my 4 years as coach, we were off the back of, I had to prioritize, and I felt that I had to give a little to sacrifice to get in areas where we need to have a bit more success. And our statistics batting wise going into my coaching life as head coach, the batting statistics at the club weren't great. The ones were averaging 170 in 2-day games, and you can't do that, not at this level. So and that was pretty bad. So the fielding did wane, but that said, in recent years, I've spent a lot more time doing fielding coaching with more one-on-one with my players, and building patterns of movement, anticipation skills, technical skills in their throwing, balancing positions and things like that. Really, really important. And even wet weather stuff. I have a philosophy with my players is there's no day off. If you plan a session and it's raining, we do some wet weather stuff. We have there's an opportunity to do some sliding, some diving and on softer surfaces and things like that. Just to get 20 minutes, 30 minutes before the chills get in. And that's that change in attitude, I think, starts with the coach and the senior players. And I think, although the one thing that I'm proud of as head coach is I hopefully brought in a different culture in fielding at Preston. This is not a knock on previous coaches and previous leaders. They certainly had wonderful fielders where they could have high intensity drills all the time. But as I said, I cycled in some young players who needed education. And unfortunately, the high intensity hit the stump or you do 10 push-ups, is not, without any kind of nurturing and discussion about technique and problem solving, is not a productive environment to teach fielding. And then I often find that's the reason why young players tend to shy away from it, because they're not actually taught how to do it. They're taught how to bat and bowl, and guess what? They enjoy that. So I like to think in recent years, and my time this year, hopefully at the club, when we actually finally get there, I'll be spending some time teaching some of the movement pattern stuff that I've learned in recent years to the players, and fielding is probably going to be front of mind outside of my batting obligations.
Tell me about the winter program that you ran.
So the winter program was born out of what I felt was an obligation that Preston had to the community. I did the under-14s Falcons as team manager 11 years ago or thereabouts. And when that season finished up, I was moving into Preston. That was the year I started playing at Preston. And they had nowhere to go. So I saw this gap between under 14s and under 16s Falcons. Yeah, there was JG Craig in the middle, but there was no development for them. And people, I'm not an expert in what I do, but I do know that your largest learning curve in terms of your growth will happen at 14, 15, 16. Outside of that, your movement patterns and all that kind of stuff are pretty much well set. You can tinker with them, but they're pretty much well set. So I approached Preston and I said, I can bring in a sponsor, $2.5 telechoice from Northcote Plaza. I don't think they're around anymore, sadly, but $2.5 to pay for this program. It'll be free to the kids. We'll have 10 to 15 kids, and they're most of the Falcons players of the previous year. We'll provide it for free. We'll get some of the club coaches. I think Hazy, Kevin Lowe, Andy Pedalis. I know John Shannon came down for a session. There was a few who graciously gave their time. And then from there, I remember distinctly feeling at the end of that season, well, that was great. It'd be nice to do it again next year, with no real belief that it was ever going to happen. 9 seasons later, we've grown it to 30 kids in the under 15s. We had 20 kids in the under 13s this year, which was the first year of the under 13s this year. We launched an under 19s program in my coaching to create a pathway between the 15s and the club. I'm very proud of the under 17s girls program that we're running. And we're looking to expand that in future years and create a real pathway for young, talented girls who want a little bit more out of cricket, but may not be able to afford it or don't know where it is or don't know, it's all about branding. So they don't know where the good brand programs are. I'd like to think that we've got a really nice balanced program that teaches people and teaches young players versus, trialing them for squads. And that's been the philosophy for nigh on 10 years, almost 10 years now. 10 years is next year. So I can't believe it. Personally, I can't believe it that, the academy program has a budget of 10 grand plus now. We've got a director of the program in John Hyde. Like, it's going from 13 players to close to 80 this year, all self-sustained, by the way. Great help from the club. But we started with me, John Hyde, and Stephen Wilson. That was pretty much it. And now it's very proudly, it pretty much makes up 70 to 8% of the senior list.
Gee whiz, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Well, the challenge is going to be to maintain and continue to grow and improve that program. So,
absolutely.
Keep the 1860 club members up to date with what's going on that, because it's pretty important.
That engagement with the 1860 in terms of the academy is really, really important, because they're your bookends. They're essentially your bookends for the club, and to have that cross connection, there's an incredible level of experience. In my time, untapped experience. So I really, I couldn't encourage more. If you have an interest in coming down for 1 or 2 sessions next year, big year next year, 10 years, we're making special shirts, which is very exciting. But please, come down. We'll give you the dates if anyone's interested. Hands on deck.
You also hold the role of director of cricket at the club, which is a role foreign to us oldies. Tell us, what does that role actually involve? Mm-hmm.
So it came to my attention whilst doing the coaching job that I was doing a lot of jobs that realistically the head coach shouldn't be doing. Planning pre-seasons, booking out venues, managing and recruiting staff, managing the list in terms of year to year. How does a new head coach come into a club not know where the list is? How do we know, especially the way that the club's set up now, you've got players who are a lot more transient. I think we're going to turn over close to 15 to 18 players this year. And in previous years, the numbers have been very much similar, around that 7 to 15 mark almost every year. because you've got more ambitious young people. Premier cricket's a little weaker in terms of the fourth 11 cricket, so it's a little bit more accessible, which I don't mind. It's just the facts as they are, and so young kids will do 2 years and then move on. So that department needs to be looked at. Otherwise, you'll wake up one day and you haven't got a second 11 keeper. And on top of all that, you've got your preseason scheduling, as well as overseeing the selection process, making sure that it's well supported. And then there's equipment, making sure that we've got equipment. There is a whole year-to-year jobs that are required to make sure that the cricket department functions. And I don't think it's fair that we spread all those jobs across the whole committee. And I don't think it's fair that a new coach comes into the club, whether it's Luke, who's been at the club for nigh on 10 years, or it's a brand new one, and there's no support mechanism there for them, and they've got to do everything on the run. Things like that are incredibly important. So I would say it's administration and management more than anything. And that's what the role to me is, because it makes the head coach's job a lot easier, and they can spend more time thinking about the players and what they need to get the job done.
The situation with COVID has presented challenges you couldn't even have dreamt about 3 years ago. But how are you coping with that, with these latest lockdown?
The latest lockdown has been, I think from a cricket's perspective, it's easier this year than it was last year. There was an incredible level of unknown last year. What does the end of a lockdown look like? What does playing cricket this time of the year look like? I really feel for Luke in his first year. He had to separate the players in groups of 10, for the better part of 3 weeks. That's impossible almost. So, going into this year, the information flow out of the government is a lot better. Last year, I think cricket was kind of an afterthought, whereas now, they've got directives on using nets, which is great, because that means at least Cricket Victoria and they're in the know. They've been included in the loop of the decision making. We've already got dates, which is, again, last year. I don't remember when the BSDSA released the fixture last year, but we definitely weren't in a hard lockdown when they released the fixture. Yeah. They would have released the fixture in what, stage 3 or whatever it would have been. So this year's a lot easier, that's for sure.
That's good to hear. Off the back of an excellent year last year, we were a bit stiff at the end of the season, but we came off with a premiership in the twos, which was outstanding. How's it shaping up this year? What do you think the prospects are?
Look, you can never get vision on these things, because I wasn't at the club last year. I helped out at a few sessions, did some coaching stuff with some players that wanted it and asked for it. But this year, it's really hard to know. Really hard to know. Engagement on the socials has been phenomenal. We've got a really nice balance between the older guys, the new guys. We've got a couple of different group chats to help support everyone differently, because they interact differently. And I think and I'm sure Hazy will say this. We feel that this is the best recruiting year across the board that the club's ever had. We've recruited an unbelievable fourth 11 captain. We've recruited an unbelievable first 11 captain. The players coming into the club are of seriously high quality across the board, and they're really good people as well, which makes things like lockdown, things like training on the run, and getting ready for a season in 3 weeks, all the more bearable, I'm imagining. So I've got really high hopes for this year. Don't want to put any expectations out there, because that's not fair on anyone. But I would like to think that across all 4 grades, we would be playing finals. That for me would be a really big tick. Not a pass mark. I think the pass mark's hard to know until you get into the year, because every year has a different story. But that would be an incredibly solid pass mark, and it would be a gratifying thing for those of us who work very hard to push the club, that we're all moving in the right direction.
Good to hear. So roll on November 6th, I think it is.
Yeah, 2 or 6, somewhere around there.
Yeah, first week of November. So let's hope we get some luck with COVID and we can get off to a start. I might say, Alex, I was down to training, I think, twice last year, and gee, I was really impressed with the way training is actually conducted compared to, you know, the era that I came from 50 years ago, where you just sort of turned up, had a bat, bowl, did some fielding. It was quite specific, very organised, gave opportunity to everyone to work on their game. So congratulations if you had a part in that in any shape or form last year. I know you'll have a big influence this year. We're nearly at the end of our time, but I don't think I've spoken to anyone who's so passionate about cricket as what you are, and passionate about the club. And I wish you every success in your role, and let's hope the club builds on what it did last year and has some genuine success.
Thank you, Lee. And while we do wrap up, I do want to acknowledge your role, because I think the 1860 Club has been a phenomenal initiative, and I do look forward to it growing to 500 members. I think engagement with past players and even present players, and moulding them and bringing them together is why we have cricket clubs. A large part of my philosophy as an administrator and as a cricketer is clubs are designed in the first instance as community places for people to come together. And I think what you've done with the 1860 is going to be a large contributing factor to the culture of the club, and the way and the conversations that go on at the club, you know, the way that we interact and the reason why we do things. I think connection to those of the past, and if that means that little 1% that I go out there and I go, right, I need to land this ball because, you know, I've got members of the 1860 watching me. And let's be honest, there are some who are not shy in booing their own. So that's why we do it, because at the end of the day, it's going to be my turn to sit on the balcony one day, and I'm going to want to see this club have success, and I'm going to want to feel connected to it, because it is a great place. It's got an unbelievable history, and I think that initiative does reshape the Preston conversation for the long run.
Love your passion, Alex. Love your passion. Thank you very much for everything you do around the club, and all the best for this season.
Thank you, Lee.